back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into a strange up all night world of first place baseball. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour down at the beach this week. I will be waking up early on Thursday and Friday to talk to the likes of Senators Ben Cardin, as well as Chris Van Hollen, Wes Moore. Many others are going to be joining us on Thursday and Friday. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with Window Nation. So we will be in Ocean City this week. Our next public Maryland Crab Cake Tour is the 29th. We're going to be at Pappas in Glen Burnie eating that delicious crab cake. I've never been to the Pappas in Glen Burnie. Looking forward to it. Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman will be joining us to talk about the kids going back to school. Johnny O joined us 2 weeks ago over at Drug City. You'll be hearing that all week long. Luke, I'm a little backed up around here this week. We've got 25th anniversary. We were in Greenmount Station last week up in Hampstead doing all sorts of conversations about sports wagering. We were at Drug City. We were Costas. We had winners. We had losers. We had second chancers. We had all that. But, man, everywhere I go, and I was at Costas on Sunday night with Leonard Raskin eating crabs. This is why I did Free the Birds. And it's amazing, this Free Kevin Brown thing and the owner and all the money, and he's turning stuff down and he's making news after being quiet and nobody was paying attention. Everybody's paying attention to the Orioles right now. Good ways, bad ways. Mullins goes over the wall. They give up home run. I mean, it has been as entertaining. And I know you weren't around in 79, but 79 was way like this. 89 was way like this. I don't know that you've lived through anything like this on the baseball side. And you're a baseball guy. The runaway of 97, the come from behind in 96, nothing quite like this at this embryonic sort of stage for the franchise where you're seeing all this other talent come up. Holiday, Kerstead, guys that they're going to have to make room for at some point. This has been unbelievable to watch this, to be in Costas, hearing 150 people cheer out loud, cheer out loud again. And this is West Coast baseball. We're going to be up at midnight watching this all week, bro.
No question about it. And I'm going to be the one who's going to be negative here for a moment, because I'm going to give you just one example of why John Angelos shouldn't get an additional $300 million. I was over at my sister's house on Sunday afternoon, had my login ready to go. They downloaded the Masson app on the Roku. It didn't work. So I had to instead follow it on my phone, which is not nearly as simple, not nearly as convenient. That aside, an incredible weekend of Orioles baseball. Cedric Mullins wasn't even in the lineup on Sunday, and that wasn't surprising because they're trying to keep him healthy. Coming back from his second groin injury in, 3 months? He's missed most of the season since Memorial Day, save for 3 weeks, 3+ weeks or whatever it was. So they're trying to keep him healthy. So what he did on Sunday was just a reminder of when he's at his best. He's one of the very best players on this baseball team. And when you add a healthy Cedric Mullins into the mix for these final 7 weeks, 6.5 weeks, whatever we're down to at this point before postseason, it's a reminder of this team's ability to get even better the rest of the way. So just an extraordinary weekend in Seattle. Again, full disclosure, I didn't get to see a whole lot of it because I was at the stadium Saturday night for Ravens-Eagles. And as I mentioned, Masson's app not working, and I saw other people complaining about that on Twitter. But just an incredible
Saturday night game was unbelievable, right? I mean, 0-0, nobody's hitting the ball. They win it late. It was 12-15, 12. I mean, it was late when it went down, and all of this is happening, but people are up with it, on it. When I'm sitting at the bar at Costas wearing a Jim Palmer jersey, everybody's talking Oriole baseball. Dude, I've never been more proud of Free the Birds. And people say to me, why did you pull that crazy stunt 17 years ago? It's because this is what I grew up with. I grew up with this every day. Your father grew up with this. Your mother grew up with this. You've been cheated out of this. You're 40 years old and you've been cheated out of this by ineptitude. And it's still being incredibly mismanaged. It was not a good week for John Angelos. It may be a good week in the end for Orioles fans and for the truth, because I've been the peddler of the truth, and now that Buck Showalter's wife has come out and said that the organization told her I was a bad person, I'm wondering how many other people that they steered away from me, like Adam Jones and other people, that it's unbelievable that this could be happening when the team is having such incredible success. But this isn't going to rub off on John Angelos. I don't think anybody, the reason this is working is Mike Elias is a genius. And I don't know what the next step in any of this is. And certainly I'm going to be with the governor this week. I'm going to be with all political people all week down in Ocean City. People say, hey, Nasty hanging out with the politicians. Let's figure out what's going on here. Let's sniff this out, because I think the Oakland story is a part of this with Las Vegas. And they're out on the West Coast right now. It's out all night. They're going to come back in first place. I guess they better at this point, right? Tampa now has, as much as John Angelos brought the whole world of media onto his lack of integrity and his lies and now the money and the stadium lease and all that, Tampa's got their own problem, right? I mean, this first place thing with the Orioles, it's such a pipe dream even 3-4 months ago. But now that we can see the finish line 6 weeks from now, see that the Yankees aren't coming, the boogeyman's not coming, this buy is important for them, right? And, all parts of this are every night, this going over the fence. It feels like a real pennant race in that way to me, in that, okay, they're going to make the playoffs, but now they have to win the division. And I don't know that any of us sniffed that was going to be possible on August 15th, which has made the Ravens so, I don't want to say irrelevant, but so back burner until they do something, which they didn't do Saturday, except bore the hell out of you.
Yeah, the Ravens are going to be there September 10th. In the way that the NFL's king in this country, period, when it comes
But
to
that's
sports.
3 hours a week. The Orioles have
Exactly.
plenty of oxygen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday when they're playing games, right? They will
Exactly.
until they're not playing games anymore.
There's always been that appetite to support both. I mean, it's always been that way. That's why I've always been so fatigued at the rare times where the two teams have been good at the same time, and you hear those kinds of arguments and debates on social media.
I only watch the Orioles. I only watch the Ravens.
Just,
I don't that. Yeah, like that. That was never my. I still have Baltimore Colts belt buckle 5 feet away from my arm.
There you go. But I think you look at what's happened over the last week. First of all, you mentioned John Angelos. What is unfortunate about this, and let me rephrase that, not unfortunate, let's say ironic. John Angelos was very integral in hiring Mike Elias. And the one thing that I would actually give him some credit for, if not for everything that he deserves so much disdain and criticism and negative feelings towards, is the one thing he's done differently from his father is he has not meddled in the baseball side of things. There had been no accounts of, meddling about who to draft or what players to bring up or what players to potentially trade. I mean, about
Peter really wrecked the organization by not allowing the baseball people to draft. Even when they had top draft picks, they had to take the cheap players. And like that was just an I think in retrospect, a real unbelievable concept that when you're bad, you have to take the best players. And if you have to pay them, you have to pay them. But Peter was fundamentally against that. And from the baseball perspective, they haven't spent any money either, right? So I do want to play the devil's advocate on that, which is, by the way, what Frank Wren once told me about the Angelos family. So go watch The Devil's Advocate, the movie with Al Pacino. And that's what he told me in 1998, 26 years ago, right? 25 years ago. But the amazing part of this is they've done this on the cheap. And at some point, they're going to have to spend money. At some point, they're going to make big boy trades, and there's going to have to be a grown up in the chair. I don't know what else to say. And there's no feeling that there is right now. And that's what makes all of this so weird. It has been such a strangely entertaining on the field, off the field, the lease, the batshit owner, the team itself, the likability, the fact that the Yankees and the Red Sox aren't even the bad guys. We're not even going to get to beat them in the postseason, and we're 6 weeks out on this. And I'm at pinch me when I'm sitting at Costas wearing a 66 Palmer jersey, and everybody in the bar is talking baseball in August. It's a whirlwind thing for me. It's Twilight Zone for me, Luke. And what they're talking about is same thing with Peter in the 90s. Good, bad, money, players, deals, bullpen, Is Bauman up? Where's Batista? I mean, everybody knows the eighth inning pitchers,
Mhm.
and they know CNL Perez is left. They know the team. They're speaking the language, and that unto itself is something that my mother didn't live long enough to see. You know what I mean? Like literally.
Right, right. I mean, it's exciting. And I think if we've learned anything over the last week is all the turmoil off the field with John Angelos and what happened with Kevin Brown and what's going on with the lease and all of those big picture questions that do not have answers. And there is uncertainty. Not so much that I think they're moving or any serious threat of that, but just how's this going to play out in terms of maintaining long-term health for the organization, maintaining what Mike Elias has built, to your point, whether it's coming down to augmenting with free agents or with significant trades, or how about extending a Gunnar Henderson to a long-term contract and buying out his first 3 or 4 years of free agency, the kind of things that even small market teams that are run well that they do. So those questions all remain, those questions persist, and those questions dominated much of the dialogue over the course of the last week. In the meantime, the Orioles played what was a really difficult, trying series with Houston, but they were literally one pitch away from winning 2 out of 3 from the Astros, and they bounce back and win the final game of that series, avoid being swept. Another example of how resilient this club has been. And then they go to Seattle, get their butts kicked on Friday night. Mariners had been the hottest team in baseball with the winning streak, and then they play 2 straight, dare I say, playoff-like atmosphere type game. I mean, it was a great atmosphere in Seattle. Again, full disclosure, I didn't get to see a whole lot of it because Ravens responsibilities and Massen's app not working on the Roku on Sunday. But by all accounts, you follow this, and not just Oriole fans are into it, but the Seattle fans in Seattle. It was an amazing atmosphere. Things did not go exactly as you planned. Mike Bauman gives up the game-tying home run that Cedric Mullins brings back. Next batter hits the game-tying home run. You don't have Felix Batista available on Sunday because he pitched 2 phenomenal innings on Saturday, and Cedric Mullins hits a 2-run homer in the 10th. I mean, it's just, this is the kind of stuff that.
And Cedric Mullins, who's been out of the lineup twice this year, and we're like, do we miss him? And Aaron Hicks, and what would it have been like for this team had he got 600 at bats this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough to say, well, they'd be even better because they've been so good without him. But the point is, they've had things, and we've talked about this all year. From the time of, if I had told you back in March, Nestor, that the Orioles would be 28 games over 500 in mid-August and be in first place in the American League East.
I'd say Means is back in the rotation. Rodriguez must be up for a Cy Young.
Rookie of the Year, yeah.
I would just
DL Hall would be.
Yeah. Sure. All those things we talked about in the offseason, right?
Exactly. And it hasn't gone perfectly. Now, they've also had other people step up. Like, no one would have anticipated Ryan O'Hearn would be hitting cleanup for the Orioles and playing so well. But now, he's still in the lineup. Ryan Mountcastle's come back from the vertigo and struggling so mightily at the plate, and he's been their best hitter over the last month. So it just speaks to some things haven't gone as well, but a lot of things have gone well. But I think, again, Saturday and Sunday, another great example of how resilient this team is. And look, we can talk about being resilient. We can talk about resolve. We can talk about team chemistry. A lot of times those things are thrown out there when someone doesn't have something more sophisticated to say, or it's just something you can't explain. And look, we can break down and talk about what this team does really, really well, what this team does okay, and things, frankly, that this team doesn't do very well. You look at the run differential. They're not a juggernaut in the sense that they blow teams out night after night after night. And you look at their run differential compared to Tampa's or compared to Texas.
No, they throw you with 4 hits until midnight in Seattle and eke out a run in the 10th inning, and they have a guy that's the fastest guy on the planet, running around that they can stick out at second base and try to steal a game.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I've made no secret about my feelings on Jorge Mateo continuing to be on this roster. He has no business being in the starting lineup on any kind of a regular basis at this point. But if you are keeping him around, and my sense at this point, since they haven't made the move to Joey Ortiz and to DFA Mateo, it's for examples of what he did on Sunday, making a slide, stealing a base. when he's when he's right and focused and plugged in, we know he can play great defense at shortstop, but it's a very specialized role. So I assume they're keeping him around for October to
Well,
do
hey,
those
hey,
types
man,
of things.
hey, like I don't know where his head is, and this is part of Greg Bader telling Buck Showalter's wife I'm a bad guy, and on days when you can't go to the game, I can't get in. I don't know what's in his head, but it can't be easy, right? I mean, knowing Henderson, knowing Hall. I mean, this isn't a job. This is a Patrick Queen gig for him, right? This is a short term. This, a OBJ. I'm only here for a minute. Let's go win, and Mateo's best chance to get a ring as a baseball player is running his ass off with his team and keeping his mouth shut. And when they give him the glove, go out there and play. I mean, and he's not an outfielder, right? I mean, so, I think we've seen that. So I would say this about Hyde, and I've never spoken to Brandon. I've never met Brandon Hyde. I've never been in a room with Brandon Hyde. So I mean, I see him on the television, but and I don't know how much managing he really does because I don't understand modern baseball where it's plug and play and it's all based on an analytic for the most part. And and even when Verlander leaves New York and makes fun of Buck and goes back and says he needs his analytics, he wants his analytics, this is a team that certainly provides all of that, right? As to why someone would play or not play. But there's an emotional part of this with the team, whether it's Aaron Frazier, who felt like he was off the roster, off the reservation, and he's playing again, or whether it's an Aaron Hicks who's an incomer or O'Hearn, these guys that really weren't a part of the boys club and Stout not being here, and other players making it or not making it, or Cowser who's in witness protection to some degree, right? Like who's not a 1-1, but a one pretty good, and like a guy they're counting on, and a guy that other teams he'd be their best prospect in 20 other teams in the league, right? So their riches are there. But I think Hyde, and I go back to Buck Showalter, and I'll continue to plug his wife only for the rest of my life, Luke. So you'll never get tired of hearing her name around here because I'll be bringing that up forever until the next one comes along. But Buck would say pile divers. And there's something about Mike Elias. There's something about Sigmadell. There's something about the heartbeat of these guys they bring in, whether it's even Fuji, who makes us all wet ourselves because it looks like he wets himself when he comes in ball one, ball two, ball three. I'm going to get Stanhouse on the show at some point here in the next month to talk about such things, and Greg Olson too. But whatever it is, I have a confidence level that I don't have in Eric DaCosta, quite frankly, yet because he hadn't won anything. But with Ozzie, when Ozzie would bring players in, it was just sort of like there's a 9 out of 10 chance that that's going to be a plus move in some way. It might not be perfect. It might not be the greatest move, but this Fuji move is on the back end of, let's see, the Lopez move, the Batista move, the Cano move. They still believe in CNL Perez. Like the guys they believe in. Mike Elias is a baseball genius. I'm just going to I'll spout that out because I'm becoming a true believer in that. But more than that, with Hyde managing these humans at the end of the roster, right? And Adley Rutschman hugging these guys and being that kind of leader. Adley Rutschman hasn't been swept on a baseball diamond in 4 years. I mean, that's I don't. At what point do we anoint him Ray Lewis, or let him dance, or do something, right? I don't know, but we're seeing leadership here at all levels, other than the owner, who's clearly in the weeds somewhere as far as the long-term direction of the team. But you mentioned Mateo. I just gave you all role players and how Aaron Frazier had that little pop with Henderson, and you and I talked about it, a couple week and a half ago, whatever it was, that there's a chemistry factor here that allows Jorge Mateo to feel involved, right? And feel involved enough to help win a game. And Cedric Mullins being in the infirmary twice this year to go over the wall and steal a game and come back. And I mean, they've been heroes every night here. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. It feels great 25 years into having this station to actually talk about why I built this radio station, which is to talk about my love of baseball and the fun of baseball and the passion of baseball that can link you, your sister, your brother-in-law, your mother, your niece, all in the same place, to be disappointed when your Roku doesn't work and you can't actually watch the game, but to care that much. And I love it. I love it. And I love every part of it right now. I'm immersed in it, even though I'm on the outside.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think, what you just laid out in terms of the leadership, and it does speak to this right now being separate from a very significant, substantial concern and problem with ownership and so many things off the field. It has not impacted what's happening on the field. And look, I mean, if you and I had talked 6 days ago about this, I would have said to you, look, I think the players like Kevin Brown just fine, but do I think they're thinking about that at 7:05 when they take the field, or 10:05 when they're out on the West Coast? No, I don't. I think they're focused on the task at hand, and that's winning more baseball games, because they've proven to be pretty damn good at doing that. So, in those terms, I'm not surprised that they have played the way they have over the last week, even though it's been a grind, because you've gone up against a defending World Series champion. And over the weekend, you went up against the hottest team in baseball, which the Mariners had been, until the Orioles beat them twice to close out the series. So it really does speak to how uncanny their resolve has been. And look, they have talented baseball players. They really do. And that's not to say everyone's talented, extremely talented on the team. And, Jorge Mateo's got a couple really significant gifts, but his deficiencies are significant deficiencies. I mean, he's hit like a pitcher since the end of April. Go look at the stats. I mean, I'm not, that's not hyperbole. That's kind of, look at his stats compared to Jim Palmer's career stats at the plate. It is what it is.
Or Chris Davis's
Yeah,
the last 400 at bats of his career.
The last 2 seasons of his career, 3 seasons of his career, really. But your point, and we're not trying to pick on Mateo here. It's just, but it does speak to,
he might slide in Game 7 and steal home in the 10th inning.
Maybe not
win the
stealing
World
home,
Series.
But I could see a scenario where he steals second and third and then scores on a sac fly to give you the lead in the 7th inning of a back and forth game. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's still a lot of baseball to be played between now and then. And by the way, still some significant questions. Bullpen. Michael Givens was DFA'd on Sunday. That says everything you need to know about how his rehab stint was going. That was kind of, I think it was $5 million they gave him down the drain. So Mike Elias isn't perfect, but he has earned so much trust with what he's done with this organization, what all of Sig Mejdal and all of his lieutenants and all of his front office, scouts, analytics, coaches at every level. That's another kind of undersold part of this. For years, what did we hear in the Orioles minor league system is guy would be at single A and then he'd go to double A, and the pitching coach there is telling him something different than he heard at single A, and he'd get to triple A, and everyone is on the same page. There is a long-term plan and vision to everything they do. And that's not to say that it's all perfect, but there is a rhyme and reason to what they're trying to do in every phase of the baseball side of things. Now, you get into the business side of things, you get into ownership, you get into the lease, you get into Masson, the Masson dispute with the Nationals that's gone on for a decade plus. There are so many questions and so many concerns about that. But to this point, and this is where I will give John Angelos the tiniest bit of a compliment, he did hire Mike Elias, and by all accounts, he stayed out of that side of things. But to your point, and it's not going to be this year at this point, because the trade deadline's already passed and there's not really anything else they could even do of significance. But they will come to a point where you want to make a big move, big signing, big trade, re-sign some of these young stud players that they have. And that's where you do have concerns about the ownership side of dysfunction side of things conflicting. But in the meantime, because I don't want to be overly negative about
even
that,
John Angelos can't F this up over the next 8 weeks.
Whatever they're destined to be at this point, there's no reason to think that they can't reach that. And look, that doesn't mean they're going to win the World Series. There's still elements of this team that you have questions about, but it's no different than anyone else. Tampa Bay, go look at their injured list on the pitching side. I mean, they just lost McClanahan. I mean, they are ravaged with injuries on the pitching side. Now, they're going to hit their way to the playoffs because they've been that good, and they'll continue to be good enough. And the Orioles, pitching concerns, 6-man rotation now with Cole Irvin. I have my concerns, but not to the point that I don't think they're going to hold on and make the playoffs. It'll just be a question of, are they going to be the number 1 seed? Do they hold on and win the division? Or are they going to be the top wild card and they're playing 3 games in the wild card
That would
round?
feel like a disappointment to me right now, because we have real hope, right? Like where they are right now, looking at it, forget not making the playoffs, but if if they inch in and lose 8 of 10 at the end of the year and back up and wind up losing the division by 2 games, I mean, if they lose the division by 2 games, they've backed up 5 games in 6 weeks on Tampa, right? And it's not because they're seeing each other 9 times next month and they get their brains beaten in down at Tropicana Field, which couldn't be brought up by Kevin Brown, by the way. We couldn't bring that up in
Yeah,
the broadcast.
right,
They
right.
can't watch anyway because they don't want you to watch baseball, Luke. They own a television network. They don't want you to actually watch the games. Luke Jones is here. Luke, I'm going to break out because, listen, you said the words Kevin Brown twice, maybe 3 times in this. I haven't said it at all. You and I have not had a conversation about it at all. And matter of fact, we haven't had a conversation off the air because you lost your electricity. You're covering football. The Ravens don't let me in when you can't be there. They played an afternoon game I couldn't go to the other day because they don't let me in. All this bourgeois going down and Angela Showalter and all these things. Let's talk Kevin Brown because I don't even know if do you know Kevin Brown?
Yeah, I mean, I can't
You
say
know
I've, I mean, I say hello to him and everything. I don't know him as well as other members of the broadcast team
Yeah,
necessarily, but
I just that's it. I'm done with that.
yeah.
You and I can talk about that whole topic a little later on because you've worked for me for 15 years, and it'd be really interesting if I told you what to say and not say. Like it's an un it, it's it's so Angelos. It was so percolating. I give all the Masson team all the credit in the world for not letting it out to anyone that I didn't get word of this because I would have reported on this a long time ago. Dan Connolly had no problem reporting on it, but you and I'll take that up a little bit later. I know we got a lot of football to get to, a lot of baseball. Orioles are out late. They're in San Diego all week. Luke's going to be covering the games when they let him watch them. Come down to my house, Luke. I'll let you watch the game at my place if you want. We'll make popcorn. We'll get beer. We'll get nachos. It'll be fun. Luke can be found at Baltimore Luke. I can be found anywhere the internet travels this week. We're going to be at Mako this week. Lots of things going on. No one loves the Orioles more than we do. We are on it. We're on the Ravens as well. He's Luke. I'm Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking real baseball, penny race baseball, first place baseball. I just want to say that out loud. I haven't been able to say that a whole lot. And Baltimore positive.